Thanks, Bob. That was great. As we saw this morning, we started with BD and a historical take on innovation, product innovation. We talked about Merck and open innovation. Now we've just seen a spin-off from a larger company talk about innovation based on fear and survival. That segues us into the panel of smaller companies. Again, in open innovation, smaller companies feed off larger companies and vice versa. So I'm going to introduce the moderator, and then we'll have introductions by each of the panelists, and then we'll have a fluid, dynamic presentation with a lot of Q&A, so don't be shy. Okay, Joe Healy is going to be our moderator. He's the chairman of the board of Colmar Labs Group in North America, the largest contract manufacturer of cosmetic and personal care products. Prior to joining Colmar, he was president and CEO of Reckitt and Coleman, a $4 billion consumer products company in the household, personal care, and food categories. He has considerable new product development experience and has worked with the healthcare industry for years. He serves on many boards, which I won't go into yet now. And I'm pleased to know he's also an FDU alumnus. Joe Healy.
Thanks, Jim. It's a privilege to be here with you all this morning. I couldn't resist but the presentation that Bob Huggin just gave about Celgene. And I just want to add a personal anecdote. I had the privilege, one of our companies had the privilege of working with Celgene on the launch of Revlimid. And I can tell you what he said is absolute gospel truth. The amount of collaboration, the amount of interplay, the back and forth that we did together to get that product launched through the FDA and into the marketplace is a tribute to the kind of company Celgene is. They put their money and their risk where their mouth is. Just a terrific company that collaborates and makes its partners feel like partners. So with that, let me just say this was a great segue, because what Celgene was just not that long ago, a small startup entrepreneurial company with little revenue and lots of losses, is where we want to focus today. We want to focus today on entrepreneurial companies, because everybody knows, and I think Dr. Turner said it well this morning, about 65% of his growth is coming from outside of Merck. And I think people are now realizing that the startup companies, the early stage companies, are really part of the key to future profitable growth for the pharmaceutical industry and the healthcare industry in general. So with that, I'm privileged to introduce our panel. We have with us Vivian Liu of NextMed. We have Elizabeth Posilico of Ulysses Therapeutics, Glenn Splendorio of the Medicines Company, and Arthur Alfaro of Orthocon. So with that, what I'd like to do is ask each of them in turn, and we'll start with you, Arthur, to tell us a little bit about yourself first, and then talk about your company and its strategy. Probably, yeah, from there.
Okay. My background, I started with the Ethicon division in the medical device industry. Ethicon is a Johnson & Johnson company. Helped physicians in product management, sales management, international management. And then from there went to Boston Scientific. I was in the Boston Scientific in the early days before they did their IPO. And then from there went to a company called Sophomore Danek. Sophomore Danek was in the spinal industry. I was president of their thoracolumbar division. And we, less than 3 months after coming on board with the company, we got acquired by Medtronic. So it was one of those, Bob talks about being lucky. I was very fortunate in that situation. And then from there, I left Memphis to start up a company called Orthotherapeutics with my partner, business partner, Dr. Richard Kronenthal, who's sitting right there at the table behind the camera. We started up a company called Orthotherapeutics in the area of drug delivery. And it delivers devices as well. It's kind of a unique concept or technology. And we spun out a company called Orthocon from that company that focused specifically in pain management. It was interesting, when we first went out for funding for Orthotherapeutics, we would hear from the investors that our technology was too broad and that we needed to be more focused. So we did the pain company. I think was probably about the third or fourth presentation at the UBS conference. I met with people from BB Biotech. We had a term sheet a week later, and shortly after that got a term sheet from Canaan Partners. And so we raised $10 million in venture capital funding in February 2006. We've been working off of that that $10 million for the past 2 years. It'll take us, it was a term you don't hear when you're working for a large company, and there's a dry well date. Our dry well date takes us towards the end of the year. We do have some debt financing lined up. But let me tell you a little bit about what Orthicon does. I think we have a very unique technology, and one of the things you don't like to hear is a unique regulatory path when you're dealing with the FDA. You talk about you're doing groundbreaking regulatory strategy. But what we did is we developed a product to deliver pain locally. And just by a show of hands, if I could just see if any people here have had orthopedic surgery, specifically maybe any knee or shoulder surgery. Is there anybody in here? Is that okay? And experience a little bit of post-operative pain? Okay, and you had maybe took some drugs. Some of them was nice, some of it's not so nice. Okay, and one of the things I think that a lot of people hear, they break in a cold sweat when they think about going into having orthopedic surgery is not about the outcome. They worry about the pain, and the pain is excruciating. It's debilitating. It's intractable. Okay, because what happens is people do not realize that bone is living tissue. It has blood vessels and it has nerve endings, and you cut into that bone and the periosteum around it, it is extremely painful. So imagine this concept. We have a product that it feels like soft wax. It's 100% absorbable. As an orthopedic surgeon is doing his exposure and he has bleeding, he has to stop the bleeding, because if you don't stop the bleeding, it is it's problematic in orthopedic surgery. And they use other bone hemostatic agents. They use our product, goes onto the bone, it stops the bleeding immediately, but it also has a pain relief medication. In this particular case, our first product has lidocaine, and it has 1 gram of lidocaine. And so after the doctor closes, he's done his exposure, stops the bleeding, it closes the wound. Now that material that we've implanted, just like a shot of Novocaine, numbs the surrounding area. Difference is our material lasts 3 to 4 days. Gets past the area where they have the most excruciating pain and where they have breakthrough pain. They may take other medications at the time, but the idea here is that to limit the amount of opioids that they're taking. The same concept, we have the ability to also add anti-infectives to it. In fact, we're ready to file with the FDA. That one is a very clear regulatory path. We also have demonstrated the ability to deliver statins, growth factors, and what's unique about the product is anhydrous, meaning it doesn't contain any water. So materials on there are very stable. So we can implant virtually any kind of drug. Just to continue along, where we are with this particular product, we have gone into humans. The regulatory path that we're taking that is unique is that we're saying that this is a medical device, with a drug. And that is deemed what is called a combination product by the FDA. We have gotten a ruling from the FDA that they do consider it a 510K. We are in discussions as that they do want some clinical studies done on our product, mostly safety concerns. We have started what is called non-significant risk clinical studies. These are IDE studies that you do not need to go through the FDA if an IRB deems your product not a significant risk. We have doing studies here in the United States, and we're about to start up next week in Switzerland, and we've already had some implants in South Africa. The idea there is being able to get this product approved as a 510K, not initially make a pain claim on it, but as we build our data on it, be able to have this product approved as a pain product. Just to finish up where we are, we have demonstrated in animals, safety and efficacy. We've been able to develop our own pain model where we've been able to show that the animals were relieved of any pain after our product has been implanted. We're in the process of raising a Series B fund to take us to break even. Okay.
Thanks, Arthur. Elizabeth, perhaps you could give us a view of yourself and then your company.
Sure. It's interesting. Ed earlier this morning said you never know where you're going to end up based on where you start. And Joe asked if we give a little background about ourselves and then our company, and then I want to speak briefly about our perspective on innovation. I never planned to be heading up a company or getting involved with business. Matter of fact, I always avoided business and anything to do with numbers and financial issues. So it's kind of a miracle that I'm here actually at all. I was a college dropout in 1974, and you would have called me a hippie at the time. Of course, of the ilk that I graduated high school in 1969. So my path to where I am, I can't say that I started out as a sales rep and I progressively moved through the chain in a very straight manner. In fact, it wasn't at all straight. But I went back and got my PhD, and that's an interesting story in and of itself. But I've worked all my career has been exclusively in biotech. So I started out in the early days with a company called Damon Biotech. After I got my PhD, I was determined that I was not going to continue to work for poverty wages, so I was, convinced I was going to get into industry. So I have been in biotech. I've worked with Genzyme. I work with a number of small companies. I currently now, I was in Canada for 5 years. I worked up there in the biotech field, and now I'm at Elucis Therapeutics, where I've been for 5 years. So it's been, I would say I'm a generalist. I have a scientific background. However, I've worked heading up manufacturing and production. I've worked in the marketing area. I've worked in business development. And that has worked very well. I think it's great to have a broad background, especially today when things are moving very quickly and companies have to be able to change and move very fast. Elucis is a company. We're about 40 people. We've just celebrated our 10th birthday. We still do not have a product on the market. We do not make revenue. We have raised $53 million in private venture-backed funds, but we've also raised $32 million through government funding. Our most advanced product is a therapy for the treatment of anthrax infection. After 9/11, we had people knocking on our door to please get a therapeutic for anthrax developed as quickly as possible. That was the government. We have the drug. It's been developed. The government we're still in active discussions with them, and actually I was down there yesterday. But it's been a very successful product. It's very interesting. It was a bootstrapped development program. When you only have 30 people and you're doing something for the first time as a group, it's always very interesting, and I think the key component of our success is teamwork. We had to work together. We had to leverage each other's experience, and we had to tolerate each other's differences and different perspectives. But we have developed a very effective drug for the treatment of anthrax, and we have been in phase 1 with humans, and we've done multiple studies in primates, and that's been a very exciting program. We also have another novel therapy for the treatment of anti-infectives. We use a monoclonal antibody-based approach both to anthrax but also to the treatment of some other tough infections. We're working on MRSA. We also have a product working with this heteropolymer conjugate, as we call it. It's 2 antibodies coupled together. We, quite by accident, discovered another utility of it, that it actually has a way of presenting antigens to the immune system and actually has a capability to be a vaccine adjuvant. And this was a totally unintended outcome of some of our research. So, as a strategy, we really see ourselves as an R&D company where our goal is not to be vertically integrated or have sales people at this present time. What we're good at is moving quickly, is doing proof of concept on products, bringing them forward, de-risking them for pharma or for large biotech, and our goal would be to continue to partner with biotechs and pharma and ultimately be acquired or merge with a larger company that has the horsepower, the capability, the knowledge base to take things to the market, and we don't see a reason to reinvent the wheel in that particular state. So just a couple of comments we were asked, and then I'll let others speak. What do you think is required for innovation in your company? First of all, you have to hire very smart people. First tenet. Because smart people like to think, and they can be difficult, but they're very interesting to work with. You also have to create an atmosphere, and Merv mentioned it, where people aren't afraid to discuss questions and ask dumb questions. In fact, I'm the Columbo in our company. I purposely will ask questions that I know somebody in the room knows, because I want people to feel that it's okay to tell me that that's what I'm saying is not correct. Actually, that's not the way you would do it. Tibby, you need to do it this way. And once people understand that they can talk to the CEO or the management, whoever, on an equal footing as a scientist, then you get a lot of great dialogue. Also, innovation is not planned. I think innovation occurs when resources are tight, and Bob mentioned it before, you kind of have to survive. You're forced to come up with answers to tough questions simply because the money may be running out, you may have only a couple of quarters left of cash, or you may have to meet some sort of milestone or deadline. And that's when people can really pull together and make great things happen. I think you have to accommodate the innovators. Many times the people who are innovative in your company are going to be quirky people who don't follow the norm. They may have 6 earrings, a weird haircut. They may be 22 years old, half your age, and they may walk into your office and say, I really don't think we're doing this the right way. And instead of getting sort of, geez, what about all that bureaucracy, and I'm the CEO and you're just whatever. You got to throw that out the window these days. You got to sit them down and say, well, what are you thinking about? Geez, that's a great idea. Why don't you set up a meeting and see if we can brainstorm about that? So I think management is the group that really has to change their attitude and allow these smart, quirky, fun people to express their ideas. And it's all about risk. You have to have a strategy, but you do have to accommodate a little bit of risk and know when to stop following a path. If you've decided up front that you can only go so far, you only have so much money, or you didn't get the information, then you have to be prepared to cut that program. Don't keep throwing money after something that's not getting you anywhere. So those are just my general thoughts.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Vivian, perhaps you can introduce yourself to the group and then talk a bit about your company.
Sure. I was sitting here listening to Elizabeth, and I'm thinking, wow, I agree with a lot of the things you say. And also in terms of personal career development, I never thought I would become CEO of a pharmaceutical company as well. I have had a very unusual path to get to where I am today. My academic background is actually in finance, but for the first 10 years of my career, I spent it as a kind of a business development advisor to the Quebec government office in Los Angeles, and I was helping Canadian American companies do business, in Canada and the U.S. And in 1995, I was lucky enough to get together with some folks and found NextMed. And it's been a very interesting path for us. We've had definitely a roller coaster ride of ups and downs. Hopefully we're moving our way back up again. We're a small public company where our stock is listed on NASDAQ. What we have is a proprietary drug delivery technology, which is well patented. It's versatile in terms of it could be incorporated into different dosage forms with different drugs. And we have, over the 13, 14 years of existence, established a fairly extensive safety and efficacy dossier to support the technology. Early on, we chose to to basically create value for our shareholders by developing our own products rather than becoming a technology license house. And we focused on drugs that are off patent, that have very well-known safety and efficacy profiles that would make sense going topically. For example, our first product that we filed the NDA on last year and licensed to Warner-Chilcott is a topical alprostadil treatment for erectile dysfunction. Alprostadil has been around for many years, but it's currently available on the market in an injectable form, or it's an intraurethral insert. So as you can imagine, neither one of these is very patient-friendly. So by offering a topical approach to delivering alprostadil, we hope that we will be able to improve patient compliance. The second lead product in our pipeline is a topical terbinafine for treating onychomycosis, commonly known as nail fungus. We actually licensed the product when we were in phase 1 to Novartis to develop the second generation of Lamisil. I'm sure many of you have seen those Digger commercials. Lamisil is extremely successful product, up till the time of the last of its oral patents expired last year, by licensing our product and kind of getting the new IP behind the formulation and the way we're doing it, Novartis is able to potentially, push that product, the franchise, out for another 20 years. That product is currently now in phase 3 trials. The last patient out is expected to take place July of this year. So it's, assuming the data is good, Novartis intends on filing the NDA before the end of the year for this product, and also the application in Europe shortly after. I thought a lot about, in terms of what I would share with the audience in the area of innovation, and I agree with everything Elizabeth and all the other speakers have said. I think coming from a non-technical background and having worked with for the kind of the first 10 years of the company's history, that it's I would say that you need to, innovation is definitely science-driven, but to the process forward in terms of advancing your innovation needs to be a more well-balanced approach. I mean, as CEO, I became CEO last year. I should tell you that prior to that, I served as CFO of the company from 1999 to 2005, and as COO from 2005 to 2007. And I observed a lot of the mistakes that were made, that, as a small company, we often focus on putting every cent in the research program, and we forget about getting kind of reality checks in terms of doing a more interdisciplinary approach to move our program forward. I think that any time you are off balance in terms of having a scientist driving everything or having the VCs behind you driving everything, can potentially cause fatal mistakes to be made later on, and it becomes very costly later to fix, if even fixable. I mean, that was definitely a lesson learned at NextMed. So as CEO, I have implemented a much more, I feel like, balanced way of selecting candidates going forward. And I think that I agree with Elizabeth. I mean, if something doesn't work, kill it. But it's also important that along the process, you continue to have the reality check. It may entail spending a little bit of money of, bringing in the key opinion leaders, or perhaps doing a small survey at a key industry event where you can get feedback from the users to really tell you, hey, what you're doing is great, because everybody is you don't want to admit your baby may not be the cutest in the world and may not be what you think it is. But also that feedback is also very essential in a growing company, because you're always in front of investors or or potential partners to sell your baby. Well, you need to come across being credible. And I think often people lose their credibility because they're still continuing to talk about, their thing is the greatest thing since sliced white bread, and often that may not be the case as time changes. The window of opportunity, the window may not be as big, or other things have changed. So that's what I have to share with the audience today, and perhaps we'll have more later on during question and answer.
Thanks, Vivian. Glenn, you're, I guess, picking up the balance of this, so why don't you talk about your company, which is a pretty exciting place.
Thank you. Thanks. First, I'd like to say that I'm a graduate of FDU in 1983. I received an MBA in finance. I have an interesting career, although you'll see I'm financially trained. I had opportunities to work for both very large companies and small companies in the biotech space, up to big pharma, and even spent some time outside the industry. I spent 12 years at Hoffman LaRoche, was fortunate to work in all of their businesses over those 12 years, including 2 assignments overseas, where I met many of the people that I'm working with today at the medicines company, which I'll talk about in a moment. Roche was a great experience for me, not only the opportunity to work on some very interesting transactions, probably did the first co-promote in the mid-'80s with Glaxo, was an innovator on the biotech side. And when I left in '92, I was CFO of their PCR business, which is the core of their diagnostic business today. Interesting story. I know there was a question asked of Bob Eugen before about size of companies, how do you manage growth? In 1989, I worked with a small company called Amgen, that had less than 500 people in Europe, and we were on the Roche team launching Neupogen for them. And talk about a transition over 2 years with Epogen and Neupogen. It was quite a transformation, and they had many challenges growing from a company of under 1,000 people to where they were only a couple of years later, which was in the multi-thousands, similar to the path that you've heard Bob talk about. Did leave the industry for 4 years and went to work for Sony as a global CFO of one of their entertainment companies and launched PlayStation. It was probably the most fun I ever had as a job, and my kids have never forgiven me since I've left. 1996, I met up with some of the people I worked with at Roche in a small incubator. Clive Meanwell, who's the founder of the medicines company, we wrote the initial business plan and raised $5 million of capital from Warburg Pincus and Quintiles to start the medicines company. And the model at that point in time was probably a pure play buy and build, probably the first of its kind, really, because I think many have tried to copy the model, many successfully. We took the $5 million, we bought a product from Biogen called Herolog at the time, very small upfront payments and very large back-end royalties with the assumption that it would take significant investment and you wanted to de-risk it. The criteria back then was had to find a product that was within 4 years of the market, had a probability of success that was greater than 65%, had sales of up to 100 million, could do it with less than 100 people in the field. We weren't a hospital company at that point, but it would tell you that it would have to be a hospital product, and have an IRR that was acceptable to Warburg Pincus of greater than 35%. So a pretty high hurdle. And the company at that time really had an opportunity where most of the big pharma companies were taking products that they had discovered and developed and put them on the shelves because they didn't meet a market opportunity or a financial hurdle. It was an opportunity for the medicines company to go in and find those. I wrote the business plan, stayed with MPM Capital for 4 years, worked in the transaction VC business. Did come to the medicines company for the first time in 2000, right before they went public, as head of business development, and worked on acquiring the products that they have today. I'll talk about those in a second. Left the company, went to iTech, which was also a great learning experience, a small biotech company that had technology in anti-VEGF. The product was used for macular degeneration. The company was a high flyer on Wall Street. In fact, in 2004, we had probably one of the top 5, I still believe it's the top 5 IPOs of all time. And we're the top performer in terms of biotech in 2004, and ran into significant competition when Genentech came out with their drug Lucentis and Avastin. The company was sold. I sold the company. I was enjoying retirement, and 2 years ago I hooked up with Clive Meanwell again and joined the medicines company as their CFO and also in charge of business development. A little bit about the company. I talked about Angiomax, which is an IV anticoagulant that's on the market here in the United States, in Europe, and selected companies throughout the world. We acquired it from Biogen. Our second product, Cleverprex, which is an ultra-fast acting IV high blood pressure control medication, just completed phase 3 clinical trials and is filed with the FDA. We acquired that product from AstraZeneca, something I had worked on in 2001. Low down payment, again, very small upfront monies, back-end royalties, again, de-risking the products, the model of the medicines company. And our third product, Cangrelor, also acquired from AstraZeneca, is an antiplatelet, IV antiplatelet agent that will eventually be used in the cath lab. It's currently in phase 3 trials. We have a global trial going on worldwide with about 15,000 patients expected to be enrolled by the end of the year. A little bit about our market, which is the hospital. We talked about oncology today. We talked about Merck's large portfolio. You have some diagnostic drug delivery capability. But our model, or our market, is the hospital. And the hospital market here in the United States accounts for about 31% of the total healthcare budget. Healthcare expenses in the hospital are expected to reach $850 billion by 2010. The drug cost component of that in 2003 was about $25 billion. By 2010, it will be $31 billion. But interesting, when you talk about innovation, and I think this is the opportunity for us as a company, innovation in the hospital for new drugs has been less than stellar. Talk about some of the leading drugs. Heparin, which I'm sure you've all heard about in the news recently, is prescribed to over 10 million patients in the United States. Its origins go back to 1918. It's the raw components is pig intestines, and it was first put into humans in the 1930s. Low molecular weight heparin, which is a derivative of heparin, is the largest selling IV hospital drug. It sells about $1.7 billion. Diprivan propofol, which finished clinical trials, its first clinical trial in 1977, is the second largest selling drug with about $800 million. And if you look at drugs like Trazolol, which was taken off the market for blood loss last year, was well over $200 million at its peak, has its origins back to, I believe, cow or bovine glands back in the 1930s. So clearly not a lot of innovation in the hospital. If you look at the 10 top products, and I just talked about 2 of them, they're in many cases very old and dated. The Medicines Company, and it wasn't the original design, we put the business plan together, has compiled or has purchased or licensed in 3 great products in the hospital. And each one has its own innovation in terms of fast on, fast off. Good example is our products are very high premium priced products that demonstrate both effect for the patients as well as cost efficiency. If you take Angiomax in the hospital today, which is used in the cath lab, it competes against heparin. Angiomax costs $571 a dose. Heparin is $1.75. We've tested it in over 40,000 patients, and if everybody's talking about data today, we've accumulated compelling data that says your clinical outcomes as well as the savings to the hospital, which is estimated at over $800 per patient, has been proved by these 40,000 patients in meta-analysis. So innovation is a key part of our business. As we look for new drugs, we look for drugs that we can differentiate in the marketplace and that we can use them as really dominant leaders in its respective sectors. We have a very active business development effort right now. As the company has matured, we have many opportunities in the area of cardiovascular medicine that we're pursuing. And just a couple comments about people and innovation. It is all about people, and I think you'll hear that as a common theme today, as you look at everybody here from the large companies, Merck and BD, Celgene, the smaller companies here today, all talk about people and its connection to innovation. We're a company of about 300 people. We're expected to do over 300 million. Our philosophy is to hire the best people that you possibly can in strategic positions and outsource wherever possible. So we don't have bricks and mortar. We believe that our investment in people that develop products, that do medical marketing, that sell is key. We're also a global company. I think we're more at the 4 people that Bob talked about. Bob, you can talk about before. We have reacquired rights to our product in Europe, and are in the process of setting up a global organization. And I have to say, going back to my years at Roche, very important learning, because the markets globally are very different, and you need to understand those. And again, I think innovation comes into play. Look forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Glenn. We've talked about this morning. Our speakers this morning discussed it. You began to get into it. I think all of you have touched on it. And that's the role of culture, of people, in fostering innovation in an organization. I'd like to open it up for questions now. But before we go to the audience, I have a question I'd like to pose to the panel, and that is, what does the right culture in an organization that fosters innovation look like to you, and what's the role of the CEO in making that happen? Who'd ever like to take it?
I think somebody else mentioned before, I think creating an environment where people don't feel like there are going to be any ramifications for making a bad decision. Culture in a small company, having worked with the largest companies, the J&J and the Medtronic, Boston Scientific of the world, you can get by without making a decision. And that is what's called bureaucracy. Sometimes no decision is better than making any decision, because you don't have to worry about the risk of being wrong. In a small company, you don't have that luxury. You can't hide. So you have to create an environment where people are not afraid to make decisions, and it's very participative. A lot of these words sound cliche, but they really, in a small company, we're the smallest of all the panelists here. We're a very early stage company, pre-revenue. We're worrying about having a few months left of money in cash in the bank. But and then also, as Glenn pointed out here, creating an environment where once you bring these people on board, and you do have, putting these people in strategic positions, that they are able to do what they need to, and just really get out of their way so they can make the decisions that need to be done.
Anyone want to add to that?
Well, I think interesting, because I got to see the medicines company at different points in its evolution over the last 10 plus years. So you have a founder CEO. That's the culture initially.
Yeah.
I remember in 1996 sitting in an incubator in a room up in Cambridge where that was both the culture and the company. It was one individual. We are now struggling to keep that same vision culture. So it's very difficult. And it's something that's important because the success of the company in many ways goes back to those original principles. So it's a challenge.
Yeah.
I think, looking at the culture difference at NextMed in terms of the founder CEO and what's happening now, the founder CEO, nobody will have the same passion and the same drive and everything that he has, but I think it's also, many of the founder CEOs have also been kind of the killers of their own babies, if I can call that, because they become so irrational as to any reality but their reality. So it's a balance you must have, and often founder CEOs may prevent ideas from flourishing because it's his way or no way. So when I took over as CEO, at NextMed, the first thing I said to my direct reports is like, I will never shoot you for anything you tell me, and I encourage you to have the dialogue, the open dialogue, not just with me, but also with each other. I've implemented little things like even just sitting around and having a lunch with my direct reports every couple of weeks. We talk about whatever is on everybody's plate, sharing ideas, and trying to foster that cooperation, that communication that often gets lost as the organization grows.
Yeah, the final comment I might add is in letting people speak up, you also have to let, and it's not just scientists, but predominantly it may be scientists, experiment and know that it's okay to spend a little money here and there in what I call skunk works. Before I was CEO, a scientist came to me and asked about doing some animal studies that he thought his boss might say no to. And what did I think about that? I said, you know what? If it doesn't cost a lot of money, why don't you just go do it? See what the results are. If the results are negative, you forget about it. If the results are good, maybe people will listen. And the results of those studies actually have been work that we've been working on for the last 3.5 years. Thankfully, Steve went ahead, took the decision, but more importantly, he executed. He just didn't think of a good idea. He tested it. He came back with the data. He said, look what I found. What do you think? So I think that you have to enable people that way. You also have to have, I think, we found very helpful is having project teams, not functional, dysfunctional sort of groups, but cross-functional teams where when you try to accomplish something, have a finance person there, someone who can really think about the numbers side of things. This is particularly helpful if you're going after grant funding. You need to have a scientist, but you need to have a finance person. You might have a project manager. You might have a business development person and a manufacturing and development person. And we found that very, very helpful. And so when we run into a roadblock where there's an issue, we'll say, listen, let's throw ourselves in a room and have a brainstorming session. Let's throw some ideas up against the wall. And many times it's not the scientist. It may be the person in development or manufacturing who says, well, did you ever think about this? And we've even had a financial person mention a scientific solution that the scientists had a hard time getting their arms around, but in fact, the financial guy was right. So it's fun, and I encourage that.
Yeah, if I can add something to that, sometimes the boss doesn't always know, and sometimes somebody knows something a little bit differently or better than you do, and I think it's a matter of giving people the permission to fail, if you will, in a controlled way.
Yeah.
So it's not catastrophic, but people do feel they can take that chance, they can come forward. So let's open it up to the floor now. Sir?
So where does it, in the pharma world, sure you can take ideas from the outside, that's easy enough to do. But where you're really going to get to the next stage is you're really going to buy in on someone's deep professional knowledge. Or you're going to be having people investing in these efforts, research efforts, and then say, it's okay, I really don't need to see the patent at all. You can have it.
No, actually, patents are the lifeblood of a small company. That's what you own.
Pharmaceutical.
Right. So in our case, for instance, when Steve was doing this work, one of the first things that came out of it was, as I mentioned, that we had this vaccine discovery. It was totally anticipated by the scientific founder. And in fact, I have another thought about that. Sometimes you can be so biased by what you assume is the mechanism of action based on what the founder thought it was, that you can actually be hoodwinked, and we have now invented some other aspects of our technology because of it. But what we do is encourage everybody. One, you have to write everything down, have very easy invention disclosures. Many scientists don't think that their ideas are unique and novel. And we find this over and over again. You must write things down, because we've gone back. I just recently went back 5 years to look in somebody's notebook to try to find that time when they came up with that idea. Second to that, in an agreement, the biggest and longest discussion is over intellectual property. If you're going to work together, what do you bring in when you start the collaboration, and what do you get during the collaboration, and what do you get if the collaboration fails? Do you get your technology back, and who owns it? A huge, you need lawyers for that discussion, patent lawyers.
Yes, sir.
The Celgene experiment seems to suggest that fear played a big role in innovation. Now, at the company at the time, conditions existed naturally for fear. But as they build cash reserves, I think the fear component will disappear. But the question to the panelists is fear necessary to foster innovation? First question. Second question, you have 3 different phases: drug discovery, development, and commercialization. Now, the panelists seem to suggest that the factors that drive innovation are common across the 3. Do you think there are specific factors that drive innovation in one segment, say drug discovery, that may not be suitable for the, say, commercialization?
The whole industry has fear, because we deal with agencies like the FDA and EMEA. So, no, all kidding aside, fear, I think, is the wrong word. I think it's prudence, it's judgment, and you have to be careful, because we do deal in a regulated industry. Some of the issues that Bob Eugen was pointing out before about low cash balance, I think those are different types of fears or concerns of a financial nature. You can very quickly get into trouble in this industry, because once you commit to a program, whether it's development or research, it's quite costly, and there's no way to accelerate that. The average cost, or the average time to develop a drug is still 10 to 12 years, and has a cost of almost $800 million. So I wouldn't classify it as fear. This is a tough industry, high rewards if you get there, but it's a very tough industry. And the other point that I think Bob made that was important has a lot to do with not only good science and medicine, but a little bit to do with luck as well.
I might add, though, maybe fear is not the right word, but when you're managing cash and when you're managing cash burn, it focuses your mind pretty sharply around your priorities and where you put your time and your effort. So there is something to be said for that.
I just want to add one last point on that, is as you build your cash reserves, I think fear does get replaced with responsibility and accountability. I think that in an organization where somebody's not held accountable at the very end for performance, there are some people who don't really have that fear factor built into them. And at the risk of offending some people, I think the people in R&D, for instance, they sometimes will just feel that they can just develop products, and can continue developing products. And when we establish deadlines and timelines of when things are supposed to get done, and then hold people to that, I see much better performance from those people. And there has to be some sort of accountability. Something has to happen when somebody misses a deadline. And I think that unless there's something in place, then I think that's what replaces fear in a larger organization.
Anyone else? Well, let me just ask one to the panel, and then we'll if that'll be it, then we can wrap up. But going back to the fear a little bit, going back to the fact that when you look at the portfolios of each one of you sitting at the dais here, they're focused. They're tightly focused around a specific area of expertise. What role does that play in terms of the way you manage your development and the way you manage your resources, human resources as well as financial resources?
Well, I would say that that's getting back even to the last question, that you have to have an overriding strategy. What's in your market basket and what's not in your market basket. So that, and I try to not mandate too much to the scientists, meaning they should be able to come up with ideas, and then we get together as a management team with scientists, or even as a large group, and look at different opportunities and ask ourselves, well, geez, maybe it has some value here and here, but does it really fit our core? Is this something we know? If it's outside of infectious diseases, is that appropriate for us, or should we just be looking at biologics inside this box? And we do that collectively, and usually what happens, even the scientists who came up with the idea might say, you know what, after thinking about it, I don't think we should pursue it. And so a lot of times it's a group discussion that just is it's almost an evolution of discussion. And people usually walk out of the room on the same page, but feeling that we vented it well enough that everybody's comfortable with the fact that we either decide or don't decide to move forward, so you have buy-in.
Well, with that, I think what I'd like to do is I'd like to thank the panel, Arthur, Glenn, Elizabeth, Vivian. And I'd like to thank Jim for making this forum a reality. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, and thank you for sharing your keen insights today. I know how hard it is to get you guys out to spend your valuable time here this morning. And so once again, I'd like to give everyone a round of applause for being here, both here and in the audience.